I'd like to say a few words of introduction about our next and final speaker before lunch, Lieutenant General McKnight. He is a former Lieutenant General of the U.S. Army. General McKnight headed both tactical and strategic communications commands before becoming commandant of the Signal Training Center and commanding general of Fort Gordon in 1976. He then became the first three-star commander of the Army Communications Command in Fort Huachuca, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, overseeing more than 33,000 soldiers and civilians in 14 countries. General McKnight is an advocate of soldier education and served as commander of the 5th Signal Command in Europe and Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications Electronics in the U.S. Army in Europe. He also became the J6 Director of Command, Control, and Communications in the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. General McKnight graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, like our speaker yesterday, and retired in 1987 as a U.S. Army Lieutenant General. So please join me in a warm welcome for McKnight.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be with you today. I'm 82 years old, by the way, and I'm still kicking. I played golf yesterday, and if you really want to do something humbling, go play golf. I mean, I don't care whether you're McKnight or Tiger Woods, it's a humbling game, and one time you can be on the green, the next time in the creek. What I want to do is to talk to you. I talked last year about it. I have a book that's coming out. It's going to be called From Pigeons to Tweets. I threw pigeons in the air in the Korean War, and that's a hell of a way to communicate. But they carried that over in the Signal Corps from World War I all the way through 1957. And I was in the Korean War in '53 when they signed the armistice. 27 July 1953, and we still have troops there. I tend to agree with a lot that the senator was talking about of intervention. I spent 35 years in unpopular causes. That doesn't mean I'm sad because I didn't get a parade when I came back from Vietnam, but it does mean that we ought to think before we jump. And we should always have an exit strategy. I spent about 16 years overseas in various countries, from Korea, Thailand, India. I went into Pakistan, but that was a cultural thing too, because you couldn't get a steak in India. You had to fly up to Pakistan. This was in the 60s when the Chinese attacked India in 2 locations, down through Leh Ladakh and through Nifa. I've seen an awful lot of suffering. Some of it due to this industrial complex that the senator was talking about. I'm also on the Wounded Warriors National Trust to try to stem the suicides that come about with long wars and repetitive assignments over and over again. I had 6 straight years overseas, so I think I know what I'm talking about. These young warriors, they come back and their families get broken up. They don't ever see their children. And so you end up with an isolated group of warriors. Now, where do these come from? I was at a conference, small conference the other day, and I said, you know, I think we should reconsider and think about the draft again, because I served both with the draft and without the draft. It's much harder with the draft because you have more feedback through your Congress. When you have a volunteer army, you tend to separate that military from society. Today we have only 1% serving in the military. And it's great for people to say, oh, it's great, thank you for your service. That doesn't put your legs back on or your arms back on. And we have an awful lot of wounded warriors right now. These people would have been killed in the Korean War. They would have been killed in Vietnam. They now put armor on them And they also have, each one of them carry a tourniquet, which saves a lot of lives. But are we saving them for what? Are they going to be part of the homeless, veterans, and so forth? I hope not, because I'm going to be a spokesman for them. I run a little educational thing because I'm trying to help veterans get jobs. And I'm a benefit of that. When I was going to the University of Tennessee after I graduated from high school, I used the GI Bill materials because I wasn't in the service, but all the people in my fraternity were in the service, and they had their books, so they adopted me as their little brother. Well, they did a good job. I got to go to West Point, and it was kind of like a scholarship, but it was kind of one of those things where you kind of back in, and I had been elected president of the sophomore class at the University of Tennessee, and so when they asked, "What do you think you're a leader for?" I said, "I just was elected president of the sophomore class at the University of Tennessee. I can lead anything. The band, whatever you want, I got it." But it's a real world out there, and my 82 years tells me that if you want something bad enough and strive for it, you can probably attain pretty close to it. One of the things that I've used as kind of a little marketing tool is Ken Robinson's little book called The Element. Has anybody ever read The Element? What'd you think of it?
It's amazing. I've seen it speak several times, and the book is wonderful.
Yeah, well, it essentially says if you can find your element, which is your strong interest in my book, and then you can find that zone where you feel very good and exhilarated every day, you are in your element, you're in your zone, and you become a lifelong learner. You're constantly trying to feed that strong interest. And that's what I'm trying to tell the young people today. And I agree with the senator. You know, democracy is messy. It just really is tough. But once you see it, you don't ever want to give it up. You want to be able to nurture it and make sure that your children and your grandchildren, by the way, I've been married to the same woman for 60 years. What I wanted to say about the revolution from pigeons to tweets is I'm not sure that we can't stir up nations very quickly, but can we put down the uprisings, or can we do what we used to be able to do as a very strong world leader? We can't grind up young people in unwanted wars. We can't change cultures overnight. I'm a great believer. Do you have any Spanish-speaking people in the room? Estuve en El Salvador por 2 años. No hablo español, pero. But I do believe that if you go into a country, you need to be able to learn about the culture. And we had 2 long wars. We had Vietnam, and I felt I got in towards the end, 69 and 70, and it was the body count. How many did we kill? And if you read Westmoreland's book, Bob Sorley says, you know, that Westmoreland's attrition was that he told the president, "I'm killing 10 for their 1." But the president and the senator that was there in the White House said, "Yes, but we love that 1 person more than they love the 10. So you have to do, everything in this world is relative. And diplomacy, I worked with the embassy in India when I went over there and the Chinese had attacked. So, Ken Galbraith was the ambassador, wonderful guy, but he didn't go up where I did. I went up to 18,000 feet up in the Himalayas and looked at what we were trying to do, and I wondered, I'm not sure this is really going to help much. And the guys that were in the industrial complex were trying to push stuff out the door because we had X millions of dollars to spend on foreign military sales. And I was one, hopefully, I go down as being pretty honest. I said to the ambassador, I said, we shouldn't be pushing this open wire. And he said, why is that, young man? And I said, because the open wire, that's the old singing lines with telephone poles, cross arms, and so forth. And the Koreans used to steal some of that from our depots when I was in the Korean War and make nails out of that open wire. So this was a few years later, and here's all this open wire in warehouses for foreign military use. And we got money back for it. But I said, half of this stuff is under snow during the year, so why would you sell them this kind of stuff? And I've been kind of an antitrust person my whole life because everybody wants more than they can get. They want more communications. They want the lessons of history to come on the bill of your cap, you know, so I run into people on K Street down there every day, you know, they're so intense with their BlackBerry or their iPad, they run right into you. I've learned to be very adroit. I step aside and let them go into traffic. But we have a very vulnerable internet. This is Cyberwar. This is an advisor to the president. And I got to work with a lot of people that work for presidents and so forth. They were some of my mentors. And the United States uses an awful lot of commercial communications. And as such, it's very vulnerable to hacking. Now, Richard Clarke has been the anti-terrorist and the counselor to several presidents, and he has written a lot of stuff on this. And he ends this book, this is a fairly recent book within the last year or so, and he talks about how he wished the president would talk about the cyber network technology that, and he wrote out a nice little speech here, and he'd say, I know that they're not going to make this kind of speech, but cyberspace has also been abused. It's not just a free internet for everybody to use the Wikipedia on. It has been abused. If you look at my website, you won't find it on the CLIN side. You'll find it on DBSI, but I've been in federal court for over 4 years now trying to protect some intellectual property that we gained by working with all of the distance learning sites we put out for the National Guard. When I first started, I was at Booz Allen, and we were looking at how can we help the National Guard. And the National Guard took big hits in this last 10 years. Every state has many wounded warriors. But one of the things I thought we could do to help would be to give them distance learning sites where they didn't have to travel so far. Many of the National Guard had to learn a whole lot in 39 days in the year. You get more bang for the buck with Reserve and National Guards a lot of time, but you need to give them the same kind of tools when you send them into a cultural kind of environment which is rather isolated. And you need to be able to speak the language, you need to understand the prior cultures, the current cultures, and what the aspirations of the nation happen to be. And we have tons of textbooks and so forth. I agree with the senator what he said. I have part of my family has always been in education. My two daughters were both in teaching and in tutoring jobs. One was a speech therapist and the other one was kind of a comptroller that doled out the money in Jefferson County. Jefferson County is infamous in Colorado for having Columbine. And so I get first-hand information from my family. Now I have grandchildren. I have 4 grandchildren that Some of them are married, some of them aren't. The one that's married just delivered our first great-grandchild. She happens to be in the federal law enforcement side of the house, and I'm hoping that I didn't influence any of this. The other, her brother is a bomb tech in Tucson Police Department. So we're all, as a family, trying to stimulate education, but also trying to keep the lid on terrorism and some of this other stuff that's going on. But I do believe that face-to-face, you need to be able to understand the culture. You need to be able to speak partially, at least. I never learned as much German as I wanted to learn, but I traveled all over the Benelux and Germany, Italy, Turkey. I had sites in Turkey. I had them in Iran. I lost a satellite terminal in 1979 when the Ayatollah came in. And I had a site there that I presented a major with an award because he got everybody out eventually. He did better than the State Department. He got all of our site people out. Iran is a very delicate subject to most people today, but ironically, when you read the Early Bird, which I have done for the last 35 years, it's the clippings out of the Pentagon. They try to keep me current, but I said, that's pretty hard, you know, I'm having trouble with Sudoku. But there was an article in there the other day where they were talking about, oh, Israel certainly is going to strike Iran, and the plea to the Prime Minister was, please don't do that until after the 29th of May, because that's when Madonna is coming over.
No.
That's exactly what this article said.
Serious?
No, I'm serious.
Oh my God.
This was in a clipping this was out of an Israeli paper. Said, please don't attack until after the 29th of May because Madonna is scheduled to have a music. I have said many years ago that you can't stop music at the border. You can't stop the internet at the border. You can't stop HF radio at the border. I ran into ham radio operators in India that made ham radio equipment out of World War II transmitters. They had bamboo with wires in around. It looked like really something out of Smokey Stovers. That used to be a cartoon that had all kinds of different inventions for it. But he said, come in. At that time I was a major. He said, come in, Major, we will talk to Washington. And this was on the outskirts of New Delhi, India. So you can't stop transmissions as easily as you think. You can jam them. You can do a lot of things. This is our big threat from the electronic standpoint, Cyberwar. What I'd like to see done is the use of the fiber optics, the use of the telecommunications for peaceful means, not for blowing up somebody or hacking in. I think some of you may remember several years ago that Estonia was hacked. The government of Estonia was hacked. They now have one of the strongest firewall anti-encryption systems going. So sometimes you have to have a tsunami before you can repair everything that's going on. I've lived a lot in my 82 years, and I'd be happy to answer any questions related. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Dr. Yasmin Cowan. I'm Division Chair of Service at the New York City Rotary Club and Global Director of Education for a foundation. You mentioned the biggest threat is a cyber war. At the Rotary Club, we had a lecture from somebody from the military side who explained to us the biggest threat was a magnetic bomb that would take out all of the communication in a sort of a blackout storm, thereby leaving all of the buildings and people intact, except nothing would work anymore. No elevators, nothing.
So electromagnetic pulse.
Correct, thank you. And that could be done.
That was part of my specialty, too.
20 miles off the coast of, let's say, New York, a giant pulse, and
Well, one of the most interesting afternoons of my life when I was still young and virile. I was 57 years old. I was in the Pentagon, and I spent that with Albert Wallstetter. Anybody know who Albert Wallstetter was? Albert Wallstetter was the inventor of the term MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction. So he was the most interesting person that I had ran into in my short period of time in the military. 35 years, because I was a slow learner. But I spent most of my last 20 years or so, even after I got out and went with Booz Allen, trying to offset the disparities of the henny penny, the world is coming to the end, and so forth. EMP is a threat, there's no question, but you also have the ability to do minimum blockage and straighten out some of the big transformers and put protection on them so that the electronic grid doesn't go down. Mm-hmm. And yet there's so many people that don't understand this stuff. And of course, the real threat worldwide is not cyber war, it's ignorance and poverty and corruption and greed. That's the problem, that's the threat. And we have, since the Sputnik was launched, which was a catalyst for us to start looking at STEM. We didn't call it STEM in those days, we just called it math and science. We have gone downhill. People are acronym managers today. If the more letters they can put in it, the better off they like to manage those things. But diplomacy, I sat on a lot of NATO panels, and I was the roast pig when I had to go over to Congress and talk about interoperability. Senator Goldwater was still living, and he used to say, "Get off the general's rear end. We've had these problems since the Indian Wars." And we have. You know, if you put two people at the end of a football field with the same radio, but you don't tell them which channel they're on, they can sit there all day long and never talk to each other. I mean, you put two stupid people on the end of a circuit, the same thing. You got two stupid people talking to each other. The thing, and I try to keep this because my grandchildren beat up on me all the time. You know, "Oh, granddad, you're supposed to answer this Facebook." I said, "I'm not supposed to answer this Facebook." They sent me, she put me on, and then I got 3 invitations from ladies of the evening. And I said, "No, you take me off." And they took me off. I'm back on now, but I got protection now. So this is wonderful, though. It really is. Social networks are great, but only when you use them for the right kinds of things. And tweeting is okay, but you need to be able to have some coherent thing that you're trying to get across with a tweet. In the book that I've just finished, and it may never be printed, but it'll be 5 or 6 prints because I'll buy them and give them to my family. I say in there that, you know, you need to quit tweeting and start thinking. Critical thinking is where it's going to happen, and that's where it's going to happen in diplomatic channels. We need to have the very smartest people we can scrape up in all different kinds of backgrounds to run our State Departments, to run our embassies. Now you got people that, you know, they go for the green zone or they go for here and there. Those are armed camps. A real State Department office has a Marine or two to protect the front door, and that's about it. But where you really make the impression is where you have genuine things. When I was in El Salvador, the whole garage was full of these Christmas cards for UNESCO. My wife was passing them out all to the different places. You said you were a Rotarian?
Yes.
I belonged to the Rotarian Club International when I was CG at Fort Gordon. And they do a lot of good work. There's a lot of good work being done by a lot of good-hearted people. There's a lot of crooks out there, too. And when I said part of the corruption There are good NGOs and there are bad NGOs, and I have no license to peddle on any of them. But I have tried to help a young lady put a school together for Kabul, for disadvantaged children. And she has gone through so much paperwork that she's almost just beaten in the ground over 2 years of trying to get the right kind of form, the right kind of grant, the right kind of this and that. And she teamed with this young CNN correspondent that had something with the foundation, the Mondavi Foundation, which was clearing mines in places. Didn't make any difference where the mines were. They cleared them, then they planted vineyards. It's called Vines and Love or something. You turn in circles trying to do something good sometimes, but you have to have some kind of legitimate program or you're not going to get to first base at all. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking about diplomacy, the cultures of Mr. State. Speaking about diplomacy, when it comes to your work with the wounded warriors, I was wondering if you can expand on that. My whole family was military. My grandfather, my dad, my brother did 20 years Navy, sister's Army, I was with Marines. But what I found was the coming back part was the most difficult. When my brother did 20 years Navy, came back to the States, and he found the support was not there. My dad, the only thing my dad got when he finished was he was buried in a military grave, which helped us financially, but there was nothing else there. And so I'm wondering, when it comes to diplomacy, when soldiers do come back, how do you feel about using those? What are you doing, or what do you think you can show or see in the future of how to integrate soldiers back in so that they have something when they come back and not just, they come back and it's a shell shock again,
Oh yeah, well I'm probably a walking zombie sometimes because I don't get enough sleep, but PTSD, and we mentioned PTSD, and we've always had these boogeymen from the various wars. In World War I, you had gas. People were gassed with poison gas, and so you had people that came back with those kind of. In Vietnam, we had Agent Orange, and the VA is still trying to sort out who does what to whom. I'm eligible because I've had 2 heart operations to make a claim, which I haven't done, under Agent Orange, because the government has been very kind to me and taken care of me. I was on Medicare when I got the second heart operation, but on the first one, they were going to just throw me out of the Army. And I got 5 more years, got 1 more star. I said, I'm not finished. What we're trying to do with the National Trust for Wounded Warriors, and I'm one of the junior members, there's a lot of 4 stars on this, General Dick Cody, and the reason I know Dick is his brother was my aide when I commanded Fort Gordon. Dick Cody was the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, and he got deeply involved with this Walter Reed business, where the families came and they had to hang from the ceiling out there in an old hotel that was about to fall down. So he started working with Fisher House. Fisher House builds these particular quarters for families of wounded warriors. Now he's moved on to build houses for the disabled, because a lot of times the veterans that have real serious illnesses or dismemberment, they need a special kind of, even though it's outpatient, they still need to have toiletries and things that have to be constructed specifically to take care of that particular ailment. And that's why I agree with the senator so much that we have to have a national security policy, but we don't necessarily have to have an intervention policy unless we have a very good reason to stand up and punch somebody in the you-know-what locker. That's one thing that they did at the military academy when I was there. We didn't have any women, and so we just pounded the hell out of each other in the ring. And so you got to the point where, you were pugilistic and you were ready to go. And you essentially, always try to demonize the enemy. Well, after 82 years, I kind of embraced the religion of charity and love more than I do the warrior ethic of keep your mouth shut or I'll knock your head off. And I get that way here in this traffic, I guarantee you, you know. As I park down on K Street under the garage, and there was a young man that was blocking the street the other day, and I had a little touch of PTSD come back. And I talked to him like he was in the motor pool because he was blocking the garage. And he said, "I'm not cussing at you." And I said, "I'm very sorry. You know, you just lose your cool in this traffic around here a lot." And I know that these young soldiers that are coming back, they're going to have the same kind of adjustment. They are looking for jobs, though. I can produce jobs for people if they will take the retraining. My father had to be retrained. He was a yard person in the non-kind railroad yards, and he used to go along and tack something on the side of a boxcar to say where that car was to go. And you better not put it on the wrong one. You put the bananas on the lumber side, and they rot, and you're in deep trouble. You just lost your job. But he had to go back to IBM and learn how to work a sorter, because they did that automatically. As the car came up on the hump and was switched, you better have your card ready to put on there. And so you were doing it multitasking, and that's what the automation did for the switching yards. Anybody can be a learner. Anybody. I don't care who you are, you can learn and you trade. I'm not great at computers, but I can use them, and I know how to use them to the best advantage. My kids are all literate, my grandchildren, and my little boo that just came along the 13th of December. He'll be computer literate too, as quick as he gets his feet on the ground. Learning is what it's all about, and that's what jobs are. You can train the community colleges in this country used to be the wellspring for training people for light industry. You change an industry out, and you take a community college and you put them together, and you got a product. You got a working model for that. Diplomacy is the same way. You need to have people that are willing to go and study how do you do this stuff. It's not just how to go kill people. It's how do you learn to get along with them. And sometimes you have to fly under the radar of religion and politics. I think we're going to run over here. We've already run too far here. But I'll be happy to answer anybody's questions.
What I would suggest is those people who want to go to lunch, let's have another round of applause.